Hello there, World of Takers, and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Droodles Blitz, and in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Tier 10 Tech Tree Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the VZ55. This tank is very, very well armored. It's got a super high alpha and a pretty strong gun when it actually has to come to heavies. In today's video, I'll be breaking into the armor profile, the statistical breakdown, and just about everything you need to know about the VZ55 before it is introduced into the game as part of the newest tech tree line and at the top of the tree. Now, I'm excited for this tank. I think this is a vehicle I've been really excited to see come into the game and enter testing. However, there are two things I want to note about this vehicle. First of all, as I've said in the past about this tank, it features a single shot gun. This is not an autoloader like World of Tanks PC with a double shot. This is a single shot vehicle. So that is the first point I want to bring up with the VZ55. The second thing is that this tank is going to have a special mechanic. You know how the light tanks like the T100LT has its spotting mechanic where you can keep your opponents detected for 20 seconds, and the WZ-132-1 can get undetected faster, and it knows when it's instantly spotted. Well, when it comes to the VZ55, this tank is also going to have a special mechanic. I don't know exactly what that's going to be yet, as Wargaming has not released that mechanic to even testers, but that will be something that we're going to have to keep in mind, is that whatever the stats are we going over, it might be a little bit more unique because of that special ability it does have. So just keep that in mind. The other thing I want to point out is that this vehicle is currently in testing, so the statistics I'm going to go over for today's video could be subject to change when this tank is finally released. But with everything aside, let's get into the statistics of this tank. And when we take a look overall at the vehicle's design, you can see it's very, very similar to the Tier 8 Czech Premium we've had in the game for quite a while, the Skoda T56. So yeah, I'm expecting this vehicle to play very similar to the Tier 8 Premium we already have. And if that's the case, I'm pretty excited, as I really like the Skoda T56. When it comes to this vehicle's damage per minute, it sits at 2,600. And I know you can't see that, so let me drag that a little bit over. There you go. But the DPM is 2,600, which is about 10% less than the WZ-111-5A, but basically the same as the IS-7, which makes sense, because the 5A is a bit of an outlier when it comes to its 130mm armament. It features absolutely fantastic DPM, and it's just a really, really good gun overall. But the reason why I wanted to showcase this tank compared to the 5A is because when it comes to penetration, these vehicles both have 303 millimeters of pen. However, I'd actually say the 5A has an advantage because it shoots heat with 303 millimeters, which means if you do want to run Cali, you can get it up to 333, and you don't lose penetration over distance with heat, where you do with your premium on the VZ55, which is only going to get up to 318 millimeters. Now, you do carry shell normalization. I think it's about 2 or 3 degrees with the VZ because it is APCR, but still, it's not great. You're going to lose a lot of that penetration you gain over the distance that you are shooting. So a bit unfortunate there. It's actually the same penetration as the IS-7. So yeah, all three of these heavies feature the exact same penetration, which is a bit of a bummer. Now, when it comes to the alpha damage, the VZ is pretty nice. It's got 470. It's just 10 higher than the 5A and the IS-7. It's not really going to make much of a difference. On average, if you pen 10 shells in a game, which is equivalent to 4,700 damage, you'll deal an extra 100 compared to what you would do in a 5A or an IS-7. At that point, it's not a huge difference. If it was 20 or 30 alpha, yeah, it starts to add up. When it's only a 10 difference, you're not going to notice a huge jump in the damage per shot this vehicle does. When it comes to the shell velocity, it's pretty average at 920. It's about the same as the IS-7. And when it comes to the weapon handling, it's actually weird because its aiming time is great. It's 2.35 seconds, which is not only 4% better than the already insanely accurate 5A, but it's also 10% better than the IS-7. And when we take a look at this vehicle's base dispersion at 0.362, it is, well, a lot worse than the 0.326 the 5A carries, but it's a lot better than the 0.371 that the IS-7 carries. So once again, the gun in this tank seems pretty solid so far. I mean, yeah, the dispersion's nothing great, but compared to the IS-7 and the majority of the higher alpha heavies, let's say like an AMX M4, which is also at 0.362, or let's get up another, I don't know, average gun heavy tank, there's not actually that many higher alpha ones, but I mean, look at the 60 TP at 0.38. So When it comes to the gun on the VZ, it's actually pretty average for the dispersion and alpha that it carries. The on-movement dispersion is the really insane part. Right now, its on-movement turret rotation and movement rotation is 0.12, 0.12, and 0.09. The only values the 5A and IS-7 are better at is on movement when it comes to the turret rotation. That is really impressive for the VZ55. Now, I will say it's not as important because the thing about the movement and rotating tank dispersion is that's only going to affect your tank on the move. So if you're driving towards your opponents, the VZ is going to be really accurate while driving, but the 5A is still accurate while sitting still as long as you're just not moving your tank all too much. So you shouldn't have to worry too much, but for a vehicle like the IS-7, it will matter, especially with that terrible 0.2 it carries. So yeah, the VZ's gun is actually really solid looking right now. It seems like, yeah, its dispersion might not be amazing, but you're almost always going to be aimed in, which means this tank is going to be a snapshotting beast. When it comes to the gun depression, it sits at 7 degrees, which is 1 more than the IS-7, and exactly the same as the 5A, so that's pretty flexible overall. The top speed, however, is a big bummer. It's only 38 kilometers per hour and 13 in reverse, which is not the best, and its power to weight effectively is only 13.5 on hard terrain and 9 on medium. Now, when it comes to what the differences on terrain is, hard terrain is any road. So if you're driving on a map like Himmelsdorf, you're always going to be sitting on hard terrain. However, if you're on a map like Oasis Palms, you're always going to be driving on medium and more often than not soft terrain. Soft terrain is like when you're driving in water or anything like that. So do keep in mind that even though the hard terrain on this vehicle is the exact same resistances as the IS-7, in reality, the medium terrain is what you're most likely going to be driving on throughout the majority of your game, which means that, yeah, the VZ is quite a bit slower. It's about 30% slower than the 5A on mobility, and I would say about 15% slower than the IS-7. It's pretty dang slow on its effective power to weight, so do keep that in mind. When it comes to the terrain resistances, we can see why it's pretty poor on overall terrain resistances. Traverse speed, however, is very good. I'm weirded out to say that, but it's 28 degrees a second, which is 14% better than the 5A and 4% better than the IS-7. Now, traverse speed isn't massively important when it comes to a vehicle like this because you are a heavy after all, but still, that is a lot of traverse for what it is, and it'll allow you to turn very quickly and pair that with the good on-movement dispersion, be able to snap your opponents quite easily as well. Another big downside I should point out, though, is the only 13 reverse. That's bad. That means if you're in a situation that you've over-aggressed in, you're going to have a very hard time reversing out of that position, only reversing at 13, 15% less than the IS-7 and the 5A. When it comes to hit points, it is 2,400, which is 4% more than the 5A and 2% less than the IS-7, so pretty average on hit points. I guess we'll have to see if it gets sandbag armor or anything like that, but my guess is most likely not. But the most important part about a heavy like this is obviously its armor profile, which is we're going to be taking a look at right now. Now, I want to compare this vehicle's armor to a 5A. So if we go to China and pull out the WZ-111 5A, we'll be able to see how the armor stacks up. We can see the upper plate on this tank is pretty ridiculously thick. It is 442 on the flats. That means even if you're aiming down on it, this is still about 290, and you're going to have to load heat to even have a chance of penetrating that upper plate. So, yeah, armor-wise, it's pretty dang impressive. When it comes to the lower plate, however, it's not the best. It's only about 180 on the flat. Now, you can angle it, but even at an angle, I mean, it's not a very thick lower plate. It's kind of like the IS-4s, where as long as you can see it, you're going to penetrate it the majority of the shots. It has a weak spot right on the center of the upper plate, which we can see there. It's a bit of a flat spot. Now, this is only a weak spot if you're aiming dead at the center. If it starts to angle like this, it can be tricky and you're going to have to load heat. But it still is a weak spot, so do keep that in mind. You can penetrate it whether this vehicle's hull down or on the flat. It's about 240 thick. So you do have a vision port you can penetrate. Another weak spot on this vehicle is the hatch when you're hull down. You can see that's a pretty easy hatch to hit. It's 212 millimeters thick. Now, when I say pretty easy, I can tell you from my experience fighting this tank on World of Tanks PC, it's not the easiest tank to penetrate while hull down, but to put in comparison, the 5A hull down, the hatch is much harder to see, so just keep that in mind. When it comes to the roof of this vehicle in general, it might might have the weak spot that it has on PC. No, it doesn't. On PC, you can actually overmatch the roof there with higher caliber guns, but it doesn't appear that is a problem for this vehicle, so not actually too bad at all. So hold down, we can see this is where the tank's really going to be solid. There's a couple weak spots that we can notice. The turret cheeks are weak spots. They're about 240 thick right now, and that means you can penetrate the turret weak spots pretty easily, but they are a very, very hard hit. Those are tiny, tiny gaps in the armor you're going to have to shoot for. You can also shoot underneath, it looks like, the turret ring here, which is only about 24, but that might just be a visual bug, as we can see that shell's actually ricocheting down into the hull. So I'm just guessing that's a visual bug as of now, and these are not actually weak spots, as you can see. So for now, I'm not saying that that is a weak spot. That's just a visual bug. So when it comes to this vehicle hull down, really the only spots you're going to be able to pen is that vision port, the hatch, and the center of the gun right here. I'd say just go for the hatch, so that's definitely the easiest shot out of all. Now, when it comes to another couple things to notice, if you do see underneath the tracks, you can penetrate this part on both sides. So that is another big weak spot. Side scraping capabilities are not amazing on this tank. It's got a weird armor layout. You can see it's got a very, very steeply angled bit in the back that you can actually ricochet. But overall, it's not the best at side scraping. You can see this lower part becomes very easy to pen after you over angle it a bit. And it doesn't have any spaced armor. I mean, the sides are just easy. In fact, if you have HE, you can penetrate this with an Object 268 or anything that has high HE pen. You'll cut right through the side of this vehicle's hull, so do keep that in mind. That is also the same for the rear, only sitting at 71, and as well the back of the turret at 76. So if we were to bring out a vehicle like an Object 268 and put on HE, yeah, you can pen the rear of the turret, the rear of the tank there. You can pen the sides, as I said, so do keep that in mind. This vehicle is a penetration quite easily for the majority of high alpha tank destroyers. Overall, the armor seems really good. I mean, that is incredibly good armor. As I said, the flat upper plate is about 200 or 440. That means if you're hauled down against the 5A, yeah, just with 7 degrees of gun depression, your upper plate is 804. That means even a vehicle like a YAG aiming heat at you is not going to cut through you. And as well, the turret cheeks, as we can see, good luck. Nobody is going to cut through that. Now, if we were to do a comparison to the 5A's armor, we can see a pretty good idea of where the 5A is really strong, and that is the overall armor of this tank. I mean, sure, the armor on the upper plate is penetrable, and quite easily penetrated at that. It's only about 280 to 90 thick. I mean, sure, you'll get the occasional bounce because it is troll, but apart from that, anything with high pen will cut right through your upper plate. I mean, an IS-4 would absolutely crap on it. The main part about the 5A that is super strong is the turret. The turret itself, as we can see, is ridiculous. There are no weak spots, and even though it looks like the mantlet is a weak spot, that's really not. It's just a bug from Armor Inspector. That's about a 10% penetration chance in reality. So overall, the 5A turret is very, very solid, and if you're hull down, I mean, you can barely even see that hatch, just the edge of it. And by the way, the edge of that hatch is 293 thick, not the 220 the VZ carries. So I actually think the VZ looks pretty balanced right now. Like, yeah, it definitely seems super strong in some aspects, and I do expect to see the on-movement dispersion nerfed on the vehicle, but apart from that, I think the vehicle would be fine to come into the game the way it currently is. The only part I would change about the vehicle is what we'll have to see the special mechanic is, because right now it looks balanced, but if Wargaming gives this tank an overpowered special mechanic, well, I guess we'll find out. So hopefully all of you enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more like it, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below, and let me know what you think about the VZ in the comments down below. Bye-bye!